Hello, Apes, and welcome to screencast number 5. And this is chapter 6. It is Ethics, Economics, and Sustainable Development. And we were left off the last screencast, and we were talking about how economists and environmentalists take a view of uh, the environment and economy together, or ecological economies, and the need to recognize the economics exist within the environment and depend crucially upon it. In this one, we're going to continue that idea, and we're going to talk about natural resources. And you know that natural resources are substances that and forces that sustain our society and our everyday lives. They are your fresh water that you drink, the trees that provide our lumber, the rocks that provide our metals, energy from the sun, wind, water, fossil fuels, okay? All of those things that I just mentioned and more are natural resources, and they are the goods that are produced by nature. The Earth's ecological systems, their job is to purify the air and the water and form soil and cycle nutrients and regulate climate and pollinate plants and recycle waste. And these are what we call ecosystem services. They're the services that they supply to us. And they have a value that makes our economic activity possible. Without it, we couldn't be here. Our environment enables the economic activity by providing the ecosystem goods and services, and the economic activity can in turn affect the environment. So here's a list of services that we're seeing on here: soil formation, pollination, water purification, nutrient cycling, climate regulation, waste treatment. All of these are the goods that are provided from our environment, the services that we get. Economic activities actually deplete those natural resources, and in turn they generate pollution as well. So scientists that are with a group called the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, they did a study and concluded in 2005 that 15 of the 24 ecosystem services that they surveyed globally were being degraded or used unsustainably. So here's a great graphic, and we talk about graphics. This is the conventional neoclassical economics graphic that has focused on the process of production and consumption between households and businesses. If you take a look at the yellow box here, which represents the economy, this is viewing the environment merely as an external factor that helps enable the production of the goods. In contrast, when you look at the green box, and that's the environmental box, when we take a look at that, environmental and ecological economists explicitly recognize that the economies exist within the natural environment and depend on all that it offers. So when we look, here's the position of this, look where it exists. So it depends on all of that. So classical economics, let's take a look at that. Economics shares a common intellectual heritage with ethics and the practitioners of both, and the study of relationships between individual action and societal well-being. When we look at early philosophers, they believed that individuals acting in their own self-interest can harm society. There was a British philosopher by the name of Adam Smith who argued that self-interested economic behavior could benefit society as long as the behavior was constrained by the rule of law and private property rights and operated within competitive marketplaces. This is known today as classical economics, when people pursue economic self-interest in a competitive marketplace. The market is guided by an invisible hand, and that invisible hand is society, and society benefits from it. There are differing opinions that exist about this pillar of free market thought. Of course, Smith's philosophy does remain today, but many credit it for the tremendous gains immaterial wealth and industrialized nations have achieved. He says it's not from the benevolence of the butcher, and I'm quoting this from your book on page 143 if you want to follow along, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from the regard of their own self-interest. Each individual intends only his own security, only his own gain, and he is led in this by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that society more effectively, effectually than when he really intends to. Okay, so we have more effect on it. It's responsible for the gains of material wealth. It's responsible for economic inequality between the rich and the poor. And it promotes environmental degradation. He said that market price is determined by consumer preferences. Are you going to pay $600 for that iPhone? Sure, so the market price is going to stay high. If a market price for the product reflects a balance between the supply, the amount offered at a given price, and the demand, the amount that the people will actually buy at a given price, then that's what's going to keep the prices up. If the demand is not great, then it's going to drive those prices down. The right quantities of a product are produced, here's the trick, to keep those prices high. So they'll only produce a certain amount. Everybody rushes to get that because they know it's limited in supply. Have you ever heard of things shopping for Christmas and the stores don't have it and people are frantically trying to find it in other places, other avenues? They're shopping online, they're paying higher prices for it. Well, this is all done so that they're getting the full amount. Optimal levels of pollution, resource use can be determined in the same way. So the way that we use our resources, the way that we use the environment, our demands, can have the same effect. All right, so let's take a look at this graphic. This shows in A, the supply and demand. The demand curve indicates that the quantity of a given good or service that the consumer desires at each price. So this is our curve that we're seeing here. And the market automatically moves toward an equilibrium point in which the supply and the demand is equal. So at this point, this is where it's equal. Here's the supply, there's the demand, there's where it is equal. If we take a look at B, this determines the optimum level of a resource and or pollution control. And in this graph, the cost per unit of a resource use or pollution cleanup rises as the process proceeds and it becomes expensive to extract or clean up the remaining amounts. The benefits per unit of the resources used or pollution cleanup will then decrease. So the point where the lines intersect gives the optimum level. So here's our cost per unit as it rises. Here's our benefit per unit as it goes down. And then here's where that optimal level is as it intersects between those two. So we have something that they call bean counters, which is actually a cost-benefit analysis. And this is where they look at the cost of whatever action that is being proposed, and they compare the cost to the benefits from that action. If the benefits are greater than the costs, then they're going to pursue the action. If the benefits are not greater than the cost, then they typically are not going to pursue the action. So cost-benefit analysis, it can be very controversial. Not all cost and benefits can be identified or defined. I mean, it's hard to put a value on trees preventing erosion or recycling carbon dioxide. So there's some things that are difficult, so we can't identify them or define them. So here's an example. It can be easy to quantify the value of bananas that are grown or cattle that are raised on land that are cleared of a forest. So we can look at that value, but it's hard to assess the cost of that lost ecosystem service. I go back to New Jersey and I talk about how we filled in the marshlands before we realized what the saltwater marshes did. They were a nursery for multiple species of organisms that were part of the food chain, the food web in that area. The fishermen that depended on fish for the fishing industry noticed a drop in commercial fish. They couldn't figure out why. Well, because their nurseries no longer existed. The fish had no place to lay their eggs, and the young had no safe place to grow and develop before they went out to the sea. So that was one thing that was hard to assess the loss of. Filling the marshes in too. What they didn't see in their short-sightedness is those marshes were there and they absorbed the excess water of heavy rains and storms and prevented local flooding. You fill them in and the towns started to flood. We hear that in towns like Cape May and Sea Isle City and Ocean City. Just coming through Ocean City, Maryland, and Fenwick Island and Delaware, in that area, Rehoboth, Dewey. Some of the houses are up on stilts. They're raised off the ground because of flooding, because we filled in the saltwater marshes in those areas and we developed houses on them before we knew the services those ecosystems provided. We have to consider monetary benefits, and that sometimes these monetary benefits are overrepresented because it boosts the economy. The analysis is biased in favor of the economic development because we want that money, and it's biased against environmental protection. And that's, we hear some of our politicians that don't want to adopt these programs, and that's because of the monetary benefits that they're looking at, that they want. Okay, so 14 minutes into 5. Boy, time's moving fast, faster than I thought it would. We'll end here, and I will see you at 6 in just a few minutes.